let's get started on today's class. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking a look at a very important topic in psychology, but also just kind of basically an approach that's been used in multiple disciplines in science, which is signal detection. But before we get to that very important procedure, I just want to continue on with the social media professional development. So I've scored everybody that has done assignments 1 through 3, and I will post your grades on that or your score on that. Basically, for each one, if you completed the criteria, you got 100% on that, and then that will be transformed into a 10% bonus for your exam. So I'll be posting all of that on Canvas soon, but to continue with the social media development, we are going to continue with this give before you take procedure. So for the next assignment, what I would like you to do is, again, retweet any 2 tweets from psychologists that you are following. And to track this week's assignment, for the first retweet, use the hashtag IUSB student psych 01. And then for the second tweet, use the hashtag IUSB student psych 02. So once again, you do not need to retweet with any comment other than the hashtag so that I can track it when the assignment is done. And just pick something from the 5 psychologists that you're following, spread their information, give before you take by helping them reach a wider audience, and develop your presence in that network. So this is going to be due Monday, February 11th, so a little bit shorter time, just 2 days because of the exam. But once again, at any point before Monday, February 11th by midnight, choose a tweet from one of the psychologists that you follow, retweet it with this assignment's hashtag, and we'll continue to develop our social presence and our social network by, again, giving before we do the big ask. All right, so that's a social media development assignment number 4. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that because of the snow apocalypse, there's an updated syllabus. We mentioned that, but I just want to make sure everybody knows about the special online only class. So there's really no way to catch up other than trying to breeze through lectures as quickly as possible to try to make up for one that we missed. So I did a special online only cognitive psychology class on perception, ecological psychology. And this has been posted on YouTube. There's an announcement with a link to it if you haven't already seen it in my channel. And I just hope that you appreciate that I went the extra effort and posted from literally the worst flattering angle that there is, just to make sure that we can stay on pace in this course, and just to make sure that this highly influential but vastly underappreciated approach to psychology in general, that you can be exposed to that, because oftentimes it's been overlooked in cognitive psychology courses. All right, on to the matter at hand for today. So today we're going to be taking a look at signal detection, and basically how do you decide if a target is present or if it's not, and what can that tell us about how our perceptual system operates, and the insights that we get in terms of analyzing that very simple task. Is a target there? Yes or no? Are you correct? Yes or no? So this all has to do with visual search. So this is an example of where's Waldo, or depending on your geographical location, where's Wally. But this is an example of visual search. And as we're going to see, this search for Waldo is extremely difficult, and people find this extremely challenging because it is known as a conjunctive search. So as we're going to see, it's very difficult to find Waldo because many individuals in this area and many things in this area share features, common features with Waldo. So it's easy if you cheat and just go, there he is. But other than that, very difficult to find this target inside this array of distractors. So we're going to take a look at CogLab number 3, our visual search CogLab. Then we're going to introduce the idea of signal detection. Signal detection is a very, again, powerful approach that's been used in psychology. It was developed outside of psychology and has been used in many other disciplines as well. A very important topic, and then we're going to take a look at the signal detection CogLab and then apply signal detection principles to kind of analyze a very important social topic today. All right, let's start off with the visual search CogLab. So in the visual search CogLab, you were asked to find a target. So circles and squares of various colors, blue and green, were shown on your screen. And your task was to simply determine whether a green circle was among those different shapes. So there was two possibilities. Either the green circle was present or the green circle was absent. So half the time, the green circle was somewhere on the screen, and you have to indicate, yes, it's there. Half the time, the green circle was not there, and the correct answer was that the green circle is absent. So there was two variables, number of distractors. So you either had 4 distractors, so 4 non-target shapes, or you had 16 distractors, or you had 32 distractors, or you had 64 distractors. And then, so there was a, one variable was the number of distractors that were clouding your screen there. And then the other variable was the type of search. And this task either required a feature search or what's known as a conjunctive search. So a feature search, you have, in both cases, your target was a green circle. So that was what you were looking for in every single trial. The target never changed. It's just the distractors that changed. Because in a feature search, the distractor was blue squares. So you were looking for a green circle, and you needed to find this green circle among the distractor blue squares. In the conjunctive search, on the other hand, your target was a green circle, but it was hidden among 2 different types of distractors. It was hidden among blue circles, and it was also hidden among green squares. And that's called a conjunctive search. And the reason that they're called a feature search and a conjunctive search is that in the feature search, how many features do you need to pay attention to in order to distinguish the target? You need 1 feature. So in the feature search, you can do this with a single feature. So if you were completely colorblind and you could not distinguish between blue and green, you could still do the feature search just by looking for the circle, right? Because it's a circle amongst a whole bunch of squares. So you only have to look for 1 feature. You can look for circles. Or you only have to look for 1 feature. If you can't see colors, then you only have to look for the green thing amongst a series of blue things. So in a feature search, processing 1 feature for each of those shapes on the screen is going to be enough for you to be able to locate the target. On the other hand, the conjunctive search, you need to search for 2 features at the same time, hence the conjunctive. You need 2 together. So in this one, if you're looking for the green circle, it's not enough to look for things that are circles because we got blue circles in there that are the distractors. They're not the target. So you can't just look for circles. And you can't just look for green shapes because there are green squares in the distractors as well. So for this one, in order to locate your target, you have to look at the same time for both green and circle together, hence the conjunctive search. So again, how many features do you need in the feature search and the conjunctive search? We need 1 feature for the feature search. We need 2 features for the conjunctive search. And we're going to see how that small little requirement, right, just looking for 1 feature or 2 features, changes our behavior and our ability to locate that target. All right, so the conjunctive search. This is the conjunctive search, so you would start fixating there at the cross. and up would pop this array here. So in this case, this is the 4 distractor case. So we got the target right down here. There's your green circle. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 distractors for non-target shapes. There's an instance where the green circle is absent. So in this case, the correct answer would be absent because there is no target in this particular array. This is the 16 distractor condition. This one, the correct answer is present because your green circle is right there. Here's an example of 16 distractors where the green circle is absent. And this is 32, green circle present, right up there. This is green circle absent. And then finally, we have 64 distractors. Green circle is present. It's right up there. And then this is an example of green circle absent. So in each case, depending upon, in each case, the number of distractors might be changing, but your task was always the same. Where is that green circle? So let's take a look at the search results for the conjunctive search. Yep.
So is it not considered a distraction if like the green circle was like connected to a green square? It's like harder to find it.
Was that ever the case?
In some of mine, my circle was like attached to one of the squares or like underneath one of the dots.
Well, that would definitely make it more difficult, for sure. I was under the impression that the program was designed so that they wouldn't be attached. Maybe that has changed a little bit. So that would definitely make it more difficult. That would increase your times on the present searches. But importantly, when we're going to be comparing the conjunctive search versus the feature search, that would make both of those more difficult. So it's not going to change the pattern of the results, but you're absolutely right. It is a weird thing to do. All right. Any other comments before we see what happened in that conjunctive search? All right. So here we have on the y-axis here, we got reaction time in milliseconds. So it goes anywhere from 0 all the way up to 1,000 milliseconds here. So this is all within 1 second. So one of the first things to realize about this CogLab and this task is that we're very quick at finding that green circle. So all of these averages came in under 1 second. The second thing to realize is that in cognitive psychology, when we're looking for evidence for theories, when we're looking for evidence about how our minds work, sometimes tens or hundreds of milliseconds, even though it's a small difference in the lab, is a very important difference and tells us a lot about how our minds work. So never underestimate the power of hundreds of milliseconds of difference. That can tell you a lot about how your brain and mind process information. Yep.
Can you take into like other outside distractors that like weren't in the program? Because I'm not gonna lie, I was watching the Notre Dame basketball game while I was doing this, and so like something would happen, I'd look away real quick, and then be like, oh, I gotta find the circle, and then I would. So does this like not take in like other outside distractors?
Well, this wouldn't control for that. Oftentimes when we do this kind of work in the lab, when I was doing my color perception in the lab, you would be basically locked in a dark room after you dark adapted for 20 minutes and then the procedure would start. But one of the interesting things to always think about whenever you think about instances like this is, will it affect all the conditions equally? In science, if it affects all the conditions equally, it makes your data noisier. It makes it harder to detect differences if differences exist, but it doesn't change the direction of the data. So unless you identified something as a conjunctive search and said, now I'm going to watch my basketball game a little bit, and then when it was a feature search, you were like, oh no, I'm going to pay attention. Unless you did that, your times for both the conjunctive and feature searches will increase. Your times for the 4 distractor and the 64 distractors will increase. So unless there is some bias that's been introduced, you typically make the data noisier, harder to detect differences, but it doesn't change the direction of it. And that's actually something to keep in mind, because I've been finding more and more, and we're gonna take a look at this when we take a look at cognitive biases, but more and more people have been dismissing scientific results, dismissing scientific research based on arguments that really would not affect the direction of the results. So if this was a result that we needed to take to the government because we were going to change some sort of social program, people might try to dismiss this argument because they'll say, well, some of your students were watching basketball during it, so let's throw everything out. So it's very important to critically think about the arguments against certain findings to try to figure out, even if that argument is true, will it only affect one variable? Would it only affect one direction? If so, then you toss your results. But if it's going to affect everything basically in the same way, then it's a weakness. Your study isn't as good as it could have been, but it still doesn't invalidate the results. All right, so number of distractors on the y-axis here. So right about here is 4, goes all the way up to 64 distractors there. And as we can see in the conjunction search, when you're looking for that green circle among green squares and blue circles, so you have to look at both pieces of both features. As the number of distractors increased, then your reaction times increased as well. So when the green circle was present, as the number of distractors went up, your reaction time, the time that it took you to find that green circle, also went up. So increased search time as the distractors increased, and then we can also take a look at the results for when the target was absent. So you can see that it takes you a lot longer to do your search to indicate that a target is not there when that target is actually absent. And does anybody know what this difference here would indicate? What this difference in reaction time? We got about 950 here, looks like about 500 here. So what is 450 milliseconds indicating here?
That it was a conjunctive search?
Well, it's part of being a conjunctive search.
Like there was like more distractors?
There was more distractors. So this difference here, what is that measuring in terms of the time that it takes to search the array?
The amount of time it took you to look at like every single thing on the screen?
Very, very close. So this actually would be the amount of time that it takes you to search half the array. Because you would imagine that if you're searching your array, then on average, let's start when it's not there. If you're going to search your array for the target and the target's not there, you basically have to search all 64 distractors. You basically have to search all 32 distractors. You got to go one by one through the whole thing, get to the end and say, oh, it wasn't there. So this is, for the 64 distractor case, that's your time to search the entire array. For this search over here, when the target is actually present, sometimes you're going to get lucky. And that first target you look at, the first distractor you look at, you're going to be like, oh, there's the target. Sometimes you're going to get unlucky, and you're going to have to look through all 64 distractors before it's right there in the bottom right-hand corner, and you're like, oh, finally, there it is. On average, though, you're going to be neither lucky nor unlucky, and on average, you're going to have to search half the array. So this difference here is a nice way to measure how long is it taking us to actually do this search. This is the time that it takes us to search through half the array when there's 64 distractors, when there's 32 distractors, and when there's 8 distractors. So the big thing to notice here is that the time that it takes you to find the target increases as the number of distractors increases, and the time that it takes you to decide that the target is not there also increases as the number of distractors increase, and it gets wider as you go along, indicating that you are, in fact, searching that entire array, and it's taking you a longer time to go through 64 than it is 32, than it is 8 distractors. All right, any questions about this half of the CogLab, the conjunctive search? All right, so let's take a look at what happened with the feature search. So in the feature search, this was when you were looking for a green circle amongst blue squares, and you only needed to find one feature. You could either look for circles or you could look for green. Either strategy would work. Here's an example where the target was present with 4 distractors. Here's an example where the target was absent with 4 distractors, present with 16, absent with 16 distractors, present with 32 distractors, absent with 32, and then absent with 64, and then present with 64. And as you can see, it feels a lot quicker to find it amongst these distractors. So even though there's 64 distractors, your perception, your attention almost immediately goes to this green circle here. So we were expecting much, much quicker reaction times. All right, so what happened in the feature search? Well, this is what happened in the conjunction search. So once again, conjunctive search when the target was there, conjunctive search when the target was missing. So what happened when the target was there in the feature search? Well, there is your data for the feature search. So when you're looking for a single feature, you can see that it doesn't matter if you have 4, 16, 32, or 64 distractors, your time to find it doesn't increase. So it's almost immediate. It's almost like you're searching the entire array immediately, and that green circle just pops out, grabs your attention, and it doesn't matter if there's 64 or only 4 distractors, you have the same reaction time in each of those conditions. Take a look at the feature search when the target was absent. And we see that there is a little bit longer in order to determine that the target is absent. But once again, that time does not increase as your distractors increase. It maintains that flat line, no increase in reaction times. And you can see that we are way, way faster in terms of searching half the array for the feature search than we were in the conjunctive search. So very clearly, 2 different strategies are being used here. Very clearly, 2 different types of processing is going on. One in the feature search, where it doesn't matter how many distractors you have, you stay equally fast. Another one in the conjunctive search, where as your distractors increase, it takes you more and more and more time to find that target. All right, any questions on the data so far? All right. So let's take a look at this. So why are you better? Why are you faster in that feature condition? And conversely, why are you worse or slower in that conjunctive condition? So what are some thoughts on that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So can you elaborate on that?
So in the feature search, you're using the switch now, but you don't have to go through and look at every single thing. You just like do it overall, like really quick search because it scans out more.
Yep. So you're looking for parallel processing.
Yeah.
That's absolutely correct. And in the conjunctive search, you're doing serial processing. So that kind of, again, goes to these follow-up questions. So the reason you're better or faster in the feature condition, and what that reaction time is telling us, is that you are processing all of that information all at once. So it doesn't matter if there's 4 distractors and 1 target, all of that information is getting processed at once. It doesn't matter if there's 16 distractors, all of that information is getting processed at once. 64 distractors is just all going through this processor. That is parallel processing by definition. So you are way faster in the feature condition because when you're looking for a single feature, we in our minds have a parallel processing mechanism that can handle that particular search. On the other hand, when you're doing a conjunctive search, where you have to look for 2 features, and that's the only way to distinguish the target. That is very clearly being done with a serial processor. So we don't have a parallel processor in our mind that can look for those 2 particular features. And because of that, we have all this data coming in. We have those 16 distractors, and it hits that processor, and the processor says, all right, let me do this first one. No. Let me do this second one. No. Let me do this third one. No. Let me do this fourth one. No. And that takes time depending upon how many distractors you have. So this increase, slower in the conjunctive condition, that increase as the distractors go on, that's very typical of a serial processor. If you see that occurring, that means that whatever task you're being asked to do is being done with a serial processor. On the other hand, that very, very fast feature condition, especially the fact that it did not increase in reaction time as your distractors increased, indicated that you are processing everything at once, and that is indicative of a parallel processor. All right, any final questions or comments on the visual search task? Can anybody think of real world applications for this? For this difference here?
Would this be at all connected to being able to find like a face in a crowd, or is that a different type of processing because we have specialized facial recognition sort of system?
Well, finding a face in a crowd would, I would argue that it would probably fall under a conjunctive search, because even though it would be very, that would actually be a very interesting study to do, to see if you can find a target face hidden amongst, how fast are you at finding it hidden amongst other faces? Because on the one hand, we have a parallel processor for faces, but on the other hand, everybody here shares so many features in terms of their faces with each other. So you can't just say, oh, I'm looking for my friend in the crowd. I'm just going to take a look at people that have 2 eyes. That's not going to work, right? One nose in the middle of your face, not going to work. Brown hair, cut it down a little bit, not very much, right? So in order to find a single face, you have to look for, I don't know how many individual features before you can kind of narrow down, your friend's face. But that would be actually a very interesting study to see if it would go beyond our parallel processing abilities. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking the same thing. It's almost like having a primary and then a secondary search. Because when you're like, if I'm looking for my mom, like my primary search is like I'm looking in general for like brown hair first. I'm looking for like, because there's times I like mistake someone, you're like, oh no, never mind, you're not my mom. Mm-hmm. But you look in general for like one thing, and then when you find the one thing, then you look closer and you do like a second search. So it's almost like having 2 different, like a primary function and like a secondary function.
It might be like a feature search at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then switch to a conjunctive search.
Yeah.
To check that, kind of narrowing it down, kind of like that Guess Who board game, where like the first question you ask is, brown hair, and you're like, oh no, okay. That's a possibility there as well. And notice that in your face in the crowd thing, it's much easier to find somebody if they stand out on a single feature. So whenever I meet up with my friends, I'm the one that they look for, because chances are I'm going to be that single feature, popping out above everybody else. And we have this in our culture. When you tell your friends to go look for you, you tell them, you give them one feature. I'm going to be the one in the red jacket. I'll be the one, wearing the neon hat or whatever. And it just reminds me of that classic. If you're meeting somebody for a blind date, although those don't happen anymore. But if you were meeting somebody for a blind date, you have that one feature. You tell them, I'll be wearing that pink carnation. I'll be sitting with that Great Gatsby book, right? You give them that one feature that they can find and very easily search for you. You never say, oh, I'm going to be the one, in the blue jeans with the green top, and, give them a whole bunch of features. You usually try to figure out something that is very distinctive. and then that would turn it into that feature condition, that feature search. All right, any other comments, questions? Okay, so we're going to move now to signal detection. And again, this was a procedure that was developed outside of psychology. It was actually developed in communications, people that were studying radio signals, and it was adapted to a number of different fields, including psychology, and turned out to be a very, very powerful tool to measure our abilities, to measure our ability to process, take in and process information. So signal detection measures specifically the sensitivity of a perceptual system. So how able are you to detect if something is there versus if something is not there? That's the sensitivity of a system. So can you respond to external stimuli? So studies of sensitivities of perceptual systems is why we know that humans can only see a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. This is why we know that we can't hear dog whistles. These types of studies gives us the limits of our perceptual systems. So sensitivity in signal detection is measured, or the term for it is this D prime. So we'll mention exactly what that is in just a second. But it is the distance between the signal distribution and the noise distribution. And just about everything about signal detection is built on that signal distribution and that noise distribution. And we will explain what those are when we take a look at the general paradigm. All right, so what is the noise distribution? So I'll give you an example of a noise distribution. We're going to go to composer John Cage and a very famous piece that he did that illustrated the noise distribution. So the noise distribution, that is the noise that is in your system when there is no signal. So your nervous system is continually operating. Your nervous system is just continually firing. And even if you are in a sensory deprivation tank where there was no external stimuli, you would still have this buzzing in your nervous system, this buzzing in your perceptual system, and that is the noise distribution. So John Cage had a very famous piece called 433, and this is one of the few pieces that I can actually play on piano. So we're going to take a moment to listen to this very famous, very influential piece of music called 433. He's playing it really, really well. All right, so we're not going to watch the whole thing. It's 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. It's 3 movements. There's instructions for him to close and open his piano keyboard, but that's literally it for the entire piece. So this was done by John Cage because he was extremely interested in silence. So he was very interested in silence. He was interested, that piece was an illustration of what the audience itself brings to an artistic performance. So it's not just a performer that is doing something, but the audience itself brings something to that performance. And one way to highlight that is to take away just about everything from the performer, and what's left is what your audience brings to it. So he was very, very interested in silence, right? Everybody else in music was interested in making sounds. He was very interested in the power of silence. And he actually visited an anechoic chamber at Harvard University. So this was a chamber that was specifically designed to isolate any sounds that were coming from the outside world. And he was so excited. He went there, and he was extremely excited, and was very disappointed when he finally got placed into the chamber, because he was expecting silence. He was expecting, finally, I can hear silence. Because you almost never get to hear silence Even if we all stay quiet right now, you can hear the buzz of the lights. You can hear the fan in the projector. There's going to be sounds coming from outside. We don't live in a world of silence. And he went into this room thinking, finally, I'm going to be able to hear silence. And when he got in there, he was disappointed, and he said, I heard two sounds, one high and one low. When I described them to the engineer in charge, he informed me that the high one was my nervous system in operation, and the low one was my blood in circulation. So even in this place where there was no external stimuli coming in, he could still hear his blood moving through his body and his nervous system buzzing. And that was the two sounds that he heard. So this is a very dramatic example of what we mean by the noise distribution. So when there is no signal, when there is nothing to detect, whatever is going on in your perceptual system, in this case, whatever was going on in his nervous system, in his body, that is background noise that you cannot eliminate. And that is the noise distribution. So the noise distribution is the distribution. Yep.
I have a quick question because I don't quite understand. So when we talk about you're saying there's no signal present, but isn't the blood circulating causing like a vibration and that's what your ears pick up and hear? Or are you saying that it's something that like moves directly through our nervous system? Like I don't quite understand.
So this has to do with what is the perceiving system and what is external to that. So it's a very good question because it kind of goes back to one of the questions in perception for top down and bottom up. Where do you draw the line, right? So you could argue that the blood should be an external signal because it's not technically part of his perceiving system. However, his nervous system is part of his perceiving system. So those distinctions were a lot easier to make when people doing studies in radio communication could say, this is the radio, and the sounds coming from the radio, and the electrical static and interference in the radio, that's part of that internal signal. So I think you can make an argument that the blood shouldn't be included, and that's like an external signal. But definitely the nervous system is part of his perceptual system, and that's the main point here, is that it doesn't matter how good your system is. It doesn't matter how well-tuned, how hi-fi, how developed it is. There's always going to be some noise that is coming from that system when there is no signal being sent to that system. And this is one of the reasons why people have such profound experiences in sensory deprivation tanks, because you literally cut them off from the outside world, and whatever their nervous system is randomly doing gets amplified. And then that leads them to have these very unique experiences because it never happens. You're never really in a place where it's quiet. All right, so the noise distribution. Let's take a look at it graphically. That's one of the easiest ways to understand this. So on the x-axis, so this is going to be in general for any signal detection paradigm. On the x-axis, you have evidence. And the evidence is, you can think of it as how much activation do you have in your nervous system? How much activation do you have in your perceptual system in order to make a decision whether something is there or whether something isn't? All right, so evidence increases. So this over here is where you have very little evidence. This over here is where you have a lot of evidence. And then on the y-axis here, we have the frequency of this impression. Basically, the frequency with which you would get that much evidence. So this is how often are you going to get this much evidence. And we'll start off with the noise distribution. And typically it's a normal curve. And that is the amount of noise in your nervous system. So this is considered the amount of evidence. Because if you had to determine whether or not a high-pitched noise was on, if somebody told you, oh, I'm going to be in the room 3 doors down, and if you hear a high-pitched noise, you come running because that means that I'm in trouble. Well, you're trying to detect that high-pitched noise. But remember John Cage, he detected a high-pitched noise when there was nothing there. That's his nervous system working in his mind. So there's always some noise. So this is just your perceptual system operating. And usually, your perceptual system is going to give you this much evidence that a signal is there. It's going to give you this much evidence that you're hearing something or seeing something. Sometimes your nervous system is going to be very, very quiet, right? Just randomly, your nervous system just stops firing. A lot of neurons stop randomly firing all at once. You get very low evidence. But notice it doesn't occur very often. The lower the line, the less often you get that much evidence. Sometimes your nervous system is just going like crazy, right? This is very rare as well. It's not going to happen very often that your nervous system is just firing, 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 firing when there's nothing there. Usually it's going to have about this level of activation when there's nothing there. So very important to understand that the noise distribution is when there is nothing there. So what happens? So first off, clear on the noise distribution? Okay. What happens when you add a signal? What happens when you actually hear that sound? Or sorry, what happens when that sound is actually presented, right? When there actually is a sound? Well, then we get the signal plus noise distribution. So it's never just a signal distribution alone. It's always a signal plus noise distribution because this is the baseline condition. This is what you're starting with. And the signal, all it does is it provides more evidence so that the distribution for a signal plus noise looks like that. So if your nervous system was at this position when there was just noise, and then somebody made that sound, your evidence would move to here. If your nervous system was here when there was no noise, and then somebody makes a sound, your evidence would move to here, right about there. If it was here when there was no sound, and somebody made a sound, your evidence would move to here. Okay, so wherever your nervous system was at the time when there was no sound, when that sound is presented, that evidence is going to increase because of the extra evidence provided by the signal. All right, so far so good? So what we do as human beings when we need to decide, did I hear a noise or did I not hear a noise? Did I detect a target or did I not detect a target? Is we determine a criterion. We determine an amount of evidence above which we're going to say, yep, I heard something, right? That was a signal. And we're going to determine that same criterion, and below that, we're going to say, nope, nothing was there, right? There was no sound present. So we split our signal and noise distributions, or we split our evidence with this criterion level where we either say yes, on this side of the criterion, we say yes, the signal was there. And on this side of the criterion, we say no, there was no signal present. And this criterion leads us to be able to split this signal detection area into four distinct areas, into four distinct outcomes. So one last thing before we get to the outcomes, the sensitivity of your system, your ability to determine whether a target is there or is not, can be directly measured by the distance between the peaks of your noise distribution and your signal distribution. The wider they are, the more sensitive you are. So the larger your D prime, your distance between your peaks, the larger that is, the more sensitive you are. The smaller that is, the less sensitive you are, the less able you are to detect target versus no target. All right, so that's a lot of information. Let's break it down a little bit piece by piece, and we'll start by just taking a look at the noise distribution. So once again, noise distribution, when no signal is present, this is what your nervous system or perceptual system is doing. Signal plus noise distribution, when there actually is a signal, this is what your perceptual system is doing. And you choose a criterion above which you say that, yes, there was a signal there, below which you say, no signal present. So let's take a look at what happens when there's just the noise distribution. Below criterion, most of the time, your noise distribution is below your criterion. And what that means is that anytime that there's this much of your noise distribution, because it's below the amount of evidence that you have chosen as your cutoff line, if you have this much activation, you're going to say, I do not hear a target, nothing is there, and that's called a correct rejection. So this area of the curve, this indicates the times when you say, did I hear something? And you decide, no, I didn't hear anything. And in fact, no noise was made. No signal was given. So most of the time, your noise distribution is going to fall below your criterion, and that's going to be correct rejection. However, notice, we got this little piece of the graph right down here. Sometimes your nervous system, your perceptual system is going to have a lot of noise. Just randomly, it's going to get that high amount of noise, and it's going to go above your criterion. What that means is you are going to say, oh, I heard something, when in fact, there was no external stimuli. No sound was made. So this, where you say, oh yes, I heard something. Yes, the target was there. When it's not actually there, that's an error, and that's known as a false alarm, right? We use that in our everyday language. So if you ran into your friend's room and said, oh my gosh, I heard the noise. I heard that high-pitched noise, and your friend says, oh no, there was no noise. You would say, oh, I'm sorry, false alarm, and you would just go. So that's called a false alarm. So when there's no signal present, and you say, no signal present, that's a correct rejection. When there's no signal present, and you say, yes, I saw something or I heard something, that's called a false alarm. So those are the two possibilities when there's no signal. So far, so good? All right. There's also two possibilities when there is a signal. So when there is a signal presented, and you have your signal plus your noise distribution, most of the time that signal is going to be above your criterion. Sorry, that signal plus noise evidence is going to be above your criterion. So this is where you say, yes, there is a target present. Yes, I heard something. That's going to be correct because, again, this is when you have a signal, and that in signal detection is known as a hit. So when you say, yes, I heard something, and you run to your friend's room and they're like, yes, I made that sound, that's called a hit because the signal was there and it was above criterion, so you said, yes, it was there. The other possibility is that the signal was there, but you missed it, right? So the signal was there, but because of your low perceptual system activation, because of that low amount of noise that you started with, the signal doesn't push the signal plus noise distribution past your criterion. So this area here is where you get it wrong and you say, no, I didn't hear a sound, and the sound is being made, and that is known as a miss. So when the signal is present, you got your hits and you got your misses, and those two situations taken together cover every single possibility that can occur in a detection paradigm. So either the signal is not going to be there, and you correctly say, no signal, that's a correct rejection. Or the signal is not there, and you incorrectly say, I heard something, that's a false alarm. Or the signal is there, and you say, yep, I heard it, that's a hit. Or the signal is there, and you say, nope, no signal, and that's a miss. So those are the only four things that you can do. It can either be there, and you're right, or you're wrong, or the target is not there, and you're right, or you're wrong. Those are the only four possibilities. Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about the level of evidence, are you talking about like volume of the noise or like neural activation? So like how much your brain is
It's both.
Oh, okay.
It's both. So the level of the evidence, it's a general term because this is applied to basically detecting any target. If it's an auditory target, it would be the level of noise. Sorry, the loudness of the target, right? So a really loud target would push your evidence all the way over here. And that's why we don't miss, loud targets. But a really soft target, the softer your target, the closer these two are going to be. And that's why sometimes you don't hear those faint sounds. And that's actually you keep guessing the next the next slide. It's good. So this would be an example of the signal noise distribution for like a medium sound. If that sound got louder, that would be the signal plus noise distribution for a louder sound. For a stronger signal gives you more information or more evidence. And as you can see, when you get that stronger signal, first off, your noise goes nowhere, right? Your noise distribution just stays. That's just how good your perceptual system is. But when you get louder, when you give more evidence, look at the amount of hits here. The proportion of green in this distribution goes up, right? More of it is above the criterion. And look at this red down here, the misses. The proportion of misses, the times that you would miss that signal, that goes down. So the louder that something is, the greater your sensitivity is to that target. The more evidence you provide, the greater your sensitivity is to that target. So this measure between these two distances here, that indicates how sensitive you are, basically how able are you to detect a particular signal. So in this case, we have a louder signal, and if you bring it back here, you can also see that not only can you change your hits and misses by increasing the signal, but you can also change your hits and misses by managing your criterion or changing your criterion. So if it was kind of important that you hear your friend 3 doors down, right? If your friend said, you know, I'm working on this, and if you hear that loud noise, if you hear that high-pitched noise, that means that my computer is about to erase the last hour of work that I did, right? Let's say that that's the scenario, and that's the situation. Well, you might say, all right, in that case, I'm going to put my criterion right here. Because I would, I want to be able to help my friend out, right? You're the tech guy, so you go running in there and start pulling plugs or whatever. But it's not that important. 1 hour of work, okay, it's going to be annoying, but you can make that up. So you might choose a criterion here where you have a lot of hits, but you also have a pretty large proportion of misses. You have false alarms, and you have a lot of correct rejections. But what if your friend said, you know what, if that happens, if you hear that high-pitched noise and you don't come running fast enough to help me stop it, I'm going to lose a week's worth of work. And that's a much higher stake. That's a much higher consequence. So in that case, you can't make this any better, right? You can't make that sound louder. But you can say to yourself, all right, in that case, I'm going to take this criterion and I'm going to move it. I'm going to move it so that there's lower evidence. And what this means is that the misses now goes down. So you're basically going to say, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose to err on the side of caution. I'm going to move my criterion so it's safer, so that if I even think that I hear a noise, I'm going to come running. And that's going to increase your hits. It's going to decrease your misses. But notice that you don't get this for free, because your false alarms have now increased dramatically. So moving the criterion can make you better at one area, such as better at hits and better at misses, but it will automatically make you worse in another area, because now you're making more mistakes, you're having more false alarms. So this is something that, one of the reasons why this is such a powerful tool for psychologists is that notice that the sensitivity here doesn't change. So psychologists, for the first time, were able to measure anybody's sensitivity, regardless if they had a criterion that was kind of adventurous, erring on the side of making mistakes, or were they more cautious, erring on the side of not having any misses. It didn't matter how conservative or how liberal they were with their criterion. Their sensitivity could still be measured. So that was a very, very powerful tool used to measure our perceptual abilities. All right, any questions on that before we take a look at the CogLab? All right, CogLab number 4, signal detection. So, randomly placed dots were displayed on your screen. This was known as the star field. And the target was an additional set of 10 dots. So there was an additional set of 10 dots. And these dots would be aligned in a straight line that slanted downward from left to right. And it was your job to determine if that slanted line was present or if it was absent. So either it was present, the signal was there, or it was absent, it was just the noise distribution, it was just the star field. So present target is there, absent target is not there. And the variables were the number of distractors, that is the size of the star field, and there was either 144 distractors, 400 distractors, or 1,000 distractors. So you have to find 10 dots within 144 dots, 400 dots, or 1,000 dots. Find those dots all in a row. 144 star field. That's what it looked like. And in this case, you would take a look at this star field, and this one, it is present because the target is right there. So if you click on present, you would get it correct. That would be a hit. If you clicked on absent, that would be incorrect. That would be a miss. So this is when the signal is there. Get it correct, you have a hit. Hit absent, you got a miss. 400 star field. There we have the 400 star field. And I think it's there. Yes, it is. So in this case, the signal is there. Hit present, you get a hit. You hit absent, or you choose absent, you get a miss in this signal detection task. And then finally, the 1,000 star field. This one did not have, so hard to align these. This one did not have the target there. And this one actually I had to check. I couldn't remember which one it was. But in this case, if you hit present, you would have a false alarm. If you hit absent, you would have a correct rejection. You correctly said no star field is present. All right, so what happened in the results? How good were we at detecting this target, or correctly saying no, the target is not there? So for 144 stars, what you can do, the way that signal detection theory works, it's got a mathematically complex kind of equations behind it. But the basic idea is that you take a look at the hits, you take a look at the false alarms, you take a look at the correct rejections, and you take a look at the misses. And that allows you to determine where your signal and noise distribution is and where your noise distribution is alone. Because this is when the star field was there plus the target. So the star field is your noise. And in these experiments on signal detection, they basically give you a lot of distractors to amp up your noise, right? That amps up the noise in your system. So the star field is the noise, the straight line is the target, and on this 144 star condition, we had 94% of the time when the target was there, we correctly said, yes, the target is there. What that means is that 94% of this star field plus target distribution, we got that correct. Those are the correct hits. So we got our hits 94% of the time. So 94% of this distribution is going to be hits. Misses. We missed the star field. Only 6% of the time that it was there. So 6% of the time when that slanted line was there, we said, no, that line is not there. We missed it. There's your 6% right there. Those are your misses. As soon as you know your hits, and as soon as you know your misses, you know where your criterion is. Because above this criterion is where you say, yes, I saw something. Below this criterion is where you say, no, I did not see anything. And that portion of the distribution determines where your criterion is. So I can tell where everybody's criterion is by taking a look at their hits and their misses, and the criterion line is the amount of evidence that splits those two areas. All right, so we have the hits, we have the misses. Note, they add up to 100%. We also have false alarms and we have correct rejections. And the false alarms are the mistakes that we make where we say, yes, there's something there when there wasn't a target. The correct rejections are the correct determinations we make when we say, no, there's no target, and there actually wasn't a target. And what we need to do is we need to put that noise distribution in a position so that 23% of it is in the false alarm territory, 77% of it is in the correct rejection territory, and the only place that that would work out is right there. So this is where we get 77% correct rejections, 23% false alarms, and from that we can measure the distance between those two, and this is where the math gets weird, but we can measure the distance between those two, and we get a sensitivity of 2.85. Don't try to think about what 2.85 actually means. It's different for every single situation. But for this one, for this star field, our sensitivity on average was 2.85. So far so good? Alrighty. What happened to the 400 star field result? So we got 400 stars. These are the results for the 400 stars. We do exactly the same type of analysis. We got 70% hits, we got 30% misses. Notice the hits went down and the misses went up. So this is the star field plus the target. This is the signal plus, noise plus signal distribution. And we need to have 70% of this be hits. We need to have 30% of it be misses. So again, target is there. 70% of the time you said, yes, it was there. 30% of the time you missed it. You said absent, and the target was actually there. And this puts our criteria right there. So this is a criterion we had, above which we said, yes, we see the target, below which we say, no, we don't see the target. Take a look at the false alarms, 39%. Take a look at the correct rejections, 61%. So we have to put the noise distribution, that star field distribution, somewhere along this line so that this very same criterion line splits it into 39% on this side for false alarms, 61% on this side for correct rejections. That's the only place that it can be to satisfy that. Measure the distance between the two peaks, and notice our sensitivity went down. It used to be 2.85. Now our sensitivity is 0.99. That's the sensitivity that we have in this 400 star field. And as you can probably predict, it's going to get pretty bad when we get to the 1,000 star field. So let's take a look at that now. No, 900 to 1,000. It's 1,000. I think I double checked it. I lost 100 stars somewhere. All right. So these are our data for the 1,000 star field. We got 61% hits. We got 39% misses. So once again, we do the thing. We got the star field plus the target. There are the 61% of the distribution that is the hits. There's the 39% of the distribution that is the misses. That determines where your criterion is. And then for false alarms and correct rejections, we got basically half false alarms, half correct rejections. So we have to put this star field distribution, this noise distribution, somewhere so that half of it is above this criterion, half of it is below that criterion. Basically, that's the only place that you can put it where we now have half false alarms. These are the half misses. This little sliver of green that you can see here, that's half correct rejections. But basically, this indicates that on the when the target wasn't there, we were basically just guessing. We were basically just at a 50-50. But notice that once we place that distribution on our signal detection paradigm here, look at that distance between the two peaks. Look at our measure of sensitivity, all the way down to 0.29. So we know that we are way worse at detecting that line of stars in the 1,000 star condition. And this is going to be the result regardless if we changed our strategy or our tactics during this procedure. So regardless if you started making a lot of mistakes and you're like, ooh, I'm going to really try to search for that star field now. I'm gonna try to change my criterion. You can change your criterion wherever you want, but you are going to manipulate at the same time your correct projections, your misses, your false alarms, and your hits. So it doesn't matter what criterion you choose, you are still going to get that particular sensitivity. That's one of the big pluses for signal detection. All right, so signal detection CogLab number 4. So did your sensitivity to the target change as the star field increased from 144 to 400 to 1,000 dots? As we saw, yes, it did. It changed a lot. We went from a very high measure of sensitivity, 2.85, all the way down to 0.29. So again, the numbers themselves don't mean that much, but you can basically take it as we were almost 10 times more sensitive, or we were over 10 times more sensitive to the target in the 144 star field than we were in the 1000 star field. So did your criteria move as the star field increased from 144 to 400 to 1,000 dots? So when people were doing this, did any of you change your strategies or your criteria as you were going through this experiment?
I just got really annoyed. I was like, wow, I'm so bad at this.
Okay.
And then I was like, whatever. It's there. Where I just started guessing.
Okay.
Because I was like, this is, I don't know if it's there or not.
So when you started guessing, were you randomizing your guesses or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when it would be like the last one, I'd be like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
And then they would give me like 10 of those in a row, then they'd put me back to the 1,000. I'm like, this is
yeah.
stupid.
No, the 1,000 is very, very difficult. And as you can see, I mean, that reflects in the sensitivity, right? It would almost be like if we were doing an auditory test. And I said, all right, you let me know when I clap my hands. And you'd be like, yeah, obviously. No, you didn't, right? But when it gets to something that we can't hear, so if I'm like, you tell me when I blow this dog whistle, you know, and you'd be like, I don't know, it's impossible to tell. So it can get so bad, and your noise distribution can get so close to your signal plus noise distribution that you're basically at 50-50. You're basically guessing. And as you can see, we got there for the noise distribution in the 1,000 star field. We didn't quite get there in the signal distribution in the 1,000 star field because we were not much better. I think it was 61% to 39% instead of 50-50. So we were a little bit better, but maybe 1,500 star field, maybe a 2,000 star field. And basically everybody here, it would just be beyond your perceptual ability to notice that, and you would just be guessing as well. So signal detection can pick up guessing. And what that guessing means is that your sensitivity has basically gone down to 0. So again, if you did this bird box challenge style and you blindfolded yourself before you did it, signal detection would pick that up because half the time you would be missing the target, but also half the time you would be hitting it, right? If you're just randomly pressing, you're going to get lucky half the time, you're going to get unlucky half the time. So your hits and misses would be 50-50. Your false alarms and correct rejections would be 50-50. Your two distributions would be right on top of each other, and that distance between the peaks would be 0. So it's actually able to detect when things go beyond people's perceptual abilities to detect them, and that comes across as a sensitivity of 0, and that's the lowest you can go. Anybody else have a change in criteria?
I think I just started second guessing myself. So like, because some of them were really close to beat. Like it was like, cause there was like one pattern, it was like one dot off essentially. And so a couple times I was just like, oh my gosh, like it's just frustrating. And so then I was like, oh wait, no, did I see it or did I not see it?
So that's a nice indication of moving your criterion, because if you start second guessing yourself, if you start saying, well, maybe it's there, maybe I've seen it, it's 9 stars in a row. I think that last one is maybe in line. what you're doing is you're taking your criterion and you're moving it down. And that would probably allow you to get a lot more hits, and you would get fewer misses. But then that would have a trade-off, because if you move that criterion, your false alarms are going to start going higher and higher and higher.
I think that's what my pattern was.
Yeah.
Because I think I actually got a lot of the correct ones. I think I had a lot of false alarms.
So even in, this is a great example of, even when people move their criterion, you will increase your hits, you'll increase your false alarms. If you move it the other way, you'll decrease your false alarms and you'll increase your hits. You'll decrease your hits and you'll increase your false alarms. Those changes always go together. But importantly, your measure of sensitivity will not change. And that's one of the biggest powerful parts of signal detection, is that regardless of changes in criterion, we can still measure whether people's sensitivity is changing or not. We can still measure that sensitivity to detect those changes. Mm-hmm.
So is everyone's sensitivity different?
Yes, it would be. Yep. So this is average results here, but everybody's sensitivity would be different depending upon their perceptual abilities. So signal detection theory is also how you would identify people who are colorblind, people with hearing impairments. So those tests where, you know, you're listening to the headphones in your doctor's office and they go, tell me which side the sound is on. You're either going to hear it in the right and say, yep, it was on that side, or you're going to hear it in the left and you're going to say, yep, it was on this side. You're either going to get a hit or a miss, or a false rejection, a false alarm, or a correct rejection. And that can be used to analyze sensitivities. And if you see the sensitivity going down, that means that your perceptual system just isn't able to detect those differences anymore. And people that can detect those differences, they would be measured as having a very, very high sensitivity. All right, so that's one of the reasons why signal detection is so important to measuring the sensitivity, because it doesn't matter what your criterion is. So it doesn't matter if you're being very cautious. It doesn't matter if you're being very adventurous. It doesn't matter if you're erring on the side of saying no, nothing is there, or if you're erring on the side of saying yes, something is there. Your sensitivity measure will not move, and that's one of the big powers of signal detection. All right, so we don't have enough time to cover this last little bit, but I'll just kind of give you a preview of what we'll do at the beginning of the class next time. So signal detection theory can be applied to a number of different areas in perception and cognition. It's always important to kind of think about how can we use the tools and the concepts that we've learned in this class to kind of go beyond the experiments that demonstrated them. Because if you were to ask me, how many times did I need to detect 10 stars in a star field, I would tell you exactly once when I did this CogLab. That was the only time that came up. But it's important to know that that's how our mind works, and that's how we can use this to analyze almost any behavior where we need to detect is something there or is something not there. So next class, we're going to apply this to something that's been very, very important in our society in the last couple of years, which is the Me Too movement. So in the Me Too movement, you got Harvey Weinstein, you got Kevin Spacey. These are allegedly, I need to say that because I'm on YouTube, allegedly of being sexually assaulted different women. And we're going to take a look at how signal detection can be used to analyze this situation. And we're also going to take a look at what it can say about borderline cases like Aziz Ansari here, who, if you recall, had a night with a woman, thought it was consensual. She later told him that it wasn't. And whereas these two individuals in their behavior, just about everybody is on the side of these people are in the wrong, for Aziz Ansari, half of the people were saying Aziz was wrong. Half of the people were saying the responsibility was with the woman. And we're going to see what signal detection can tell us about this. And it's very interesting that when people go through, like all the corporations and all the businesses now and institutions that are going through training in order to make sure that this type of sexual assault, sexual harassment doesn't occur. What is that training often called? Sensitivity training. And remember, on signal detection, what are we measuring? We're measuring sensitivity. So signal detection, we're going to see, can be applied to these situations to determine what can be done in order to increase people's sensitivities so that you have hits where both people want to engage in sexual activity. You have correct rejections where you decide, no, this is not the time, and I've correctly identified that. And how do you minimize false alarms and how do you minimize misses? False alarms basically being sexual assault and sexual harassment. We'll take a look at all that next time.